our largest city in New Zealand, I think its population now is about 1.5 million. Anything that happens in Auckland, I'm a great believer, affects New Zealand. People I know have a go at Jaffas. They don't like all that sort of carry on. But the truth of the matter is that Auckland is an economic powerhouse of this country, and that if that city works well, then generally New Zealand works well. No, it's nothing to suggest it hasn't been working very, very recently. But it also, to give you an idea, it's not just an economic powerhouse, it's a political powerhouse. The election result of 7 weeks ago was very much fueled by the results in Auckland, where Aucklanders didn't forgive this government, one would assume for a number of things, but for the second lockdown in particular. And they voted against Labour in droves or stayed at home. But so what? That doesn't mean that any of Auckland's problems are going away. To join us to talk about that now, former Cabinet Minister, National Cabinet Minister, he was a member, I think, of the first MMP coalition government in actual fact, and Auckland City Councillor Maurice Williamson. Maurice, welcome to the show. Lovely to have you on.
Good morning, Michael. Good to chat to you.
Hey, you were, weren't you? You're a Cabinet Minister in the first...
Yeah, absolutely, yes. Absolutely. I was a minister from 1990 and then was involved in the very first coalition talks with Winston Peters and the whole very big caucus that he had. And it was every day he would meet with us, or second day he'd meet with the Labour side, with Helen Clark and their team. And it was obviously a very different coalition, because it would be, he'd come to us, what are you offering? This is what we want. Can't do that. And then you say, right, well, I'm now going to meet with the other side and see if they'll match that, meet it, lift it, or whatever. Whereas this time around, it was obviously there was no other side to go to. So it must have been, what do you want in order to give us the vote, and we were prepared to give away on this. It would have been a very different set of negotiations.
I think also the policies, Maurice, overlapped pretty well too, didn't they? National.
Again, you wouldn't have needed to do much debating on things like the law and order and what are you going to do with the gangs and things with regards to a whole range of things. I mean, there would have been issues with regards to foreign ownership. Obviously, there was. Winston's very strongly opposed to foreign ownership of property. He used to beat me up all the time when I was approving the sale of the Crayford farms and so on. But they were all parked and put to one side and then taken off the table. But the general view and the whole issue with regards to the Maori issue, I think such commonality that I think, this is just my own personal view, I think Willie Jackson and a couple of the other cohorts within there drove such a divide into our society, it'll take us a long time to get back to a standard of a relationship. My wife quite regularly said to me in the last year or so, I never thought once I was racist, never ever thought that I had anything but good feelings towards Maori, and actually, mixed with them and played netball with them and so on. And I was being made to feel a bloody visitor in my own country with, we own this, you don't, get out of our country, you're a tenant in it sort of mentality. And I think that was really great that both New Zealand First and ACT and the National Party had such an agreement on that stuff, and moving already to say all departments going back to an English name unless they're a Maori-facing organisation. And I just think it's the best lineup I've seen in a new incoming government, with the best suite of policies that I've ever seen. And I was involved in many of them and was a minister, and I don't believe we were ever that either bold or fresh or a clear direction of travel.
No, good point. Listen, going back again, though, to 1996 and that first MMP, it broke apart. And in part, it broke apart because Jim Bolger got rolled and Jenny Shipley got put in as the Prime Minister. When you look back now, how much of that was the responsibility of New Zealand First's Winston Peters, and how much was that an internal issue within the National Party?
Look, the trouble is everyone will have a different view, and it'll only be your view, but I'm giving you mine. I think the Shipley rolling of Bolger was a catalyst. It doesn't seem right to break up the leadership of the major partner in a coalition without the other party having a say or being involved. But it was all done without Winston's involvement. And then from then on, I also knew, because I was confident of this, it was the very first experiment with MMP, and I knew what would happen. It had to come to an election time where you would become competitors again, having been collaborators up to a certain point. So there has to be a point where you break away and start saying we don't agree with them and we putting fresh ideas on the plate for an election. So I kept thinking, I wonder what the issue will be that will trigger the split and we'll go our own ways towards the end of the term. I didn't think it would finish as early as it did. And it turned out that Winston chose the sale of Wellington Airport shares. I didn't think it was a big enough issue to die in the ditch on, and I didn't think it was going to be that big a problem for the public, but he clearly chose that issue because he didn't like the idea of selling an asset, and he didn't like the idea of foreigners being able to buy some of the asset, and it just tore the place to shreds. I mean, I was in the cabinet room the day it all came to pieces. I looked, shocked at what was going on, but nowhere near as shocked as some of the New Zealand First MPs, because Winston packed his gear up and said, we're out of here. And I remember a member of Parliament called Jack Elder. It took him, I'd say, up to 20 minutes to pack his books together to stand up, because he did not want to go, but he knew that it was happening. And Winston said, Jack, we're going. Jack, we're going. And they walked out, and then Shipley said, well, they'll be back. Just got to give them some time to think about it. And then we heard talk that Paul Holmes had arrived at Parliament and was in the foyer and setting up for the night, and we realised it was all over, and it just came to a grinding great halt, bang.
And it was a disastrous election after that for both the National Party and for New Zealand First. This was
always going to be. I mean, the one thing that I've seen, and I've been privy to some of polling in recent times, not just the party polling, but the perception of the public polling about what they matter and what matters and what doesn't. And of course, cost of living was in there as a biggie, and of course, law and order and RAM rating was in there, and of course, Maori and co-governance was in there. But what I saw is a rich gold sort of seam running through it all was about stability, and the public were looking for stable government that could keep the ship sailing in one direction and deliver some outcomes. And instability is what triggers public flight from you as a political party. I'd like to think, I can give you an example, I'm sure they will disagree and I might be wrong, but ACT were heading towards a 15 centre. They were really, really moving towards it in this election campaign, and if you've looked at the tracking of it, they were going well. David Seymour then made a public statement about, we may not even join the government, we might just stand off to the side and make them ask issue by issue. And I tracked within the next 2 weeks a big drop away from voters, because that he had broken that stability line that they were so desperately wanting. And I watched Winston's statements, and they were so attractive to stability. He kept saying, I want to work in a coalition with a government and take this place forward. There was no sign he wanted to cause trouble with it. There were people who kept raising his past, but that didn't seem to matter to the voting public. And that stability aspect was what blew us apart. By the time we went to the public in 1999, I have to tell you, it was so funny. I would go up to Premier House most nights, because I was a front bench minister, and I'd go up to Premier House and sit with Jenny and 3 or 4 others, and we would plan our media statements for the next 2 days and policy release for the next 2 days, and how we would try to recapture the narrative. And 2 days later, we'd get some polling in, and we'd dropped even further. And then we'd try some more. Okay, well, what we're going to do is run with something like this, and this will really capture the imaginations and the hearts and minds. 2 days later, we've dropped more. And it was literally, I can tell you that when those tidal waves of change sweep through, the very best you can do is try to minimise the collateral damage. Mike Moore will tell you the exact same thing had happened in 1990, when it was just a guaranteed bath of Labour being wiped from the planet. And Bolger, I mean, I was part of it, and Ruth Richardson was certainly one of them, pleading with Bolger not to keep promising, because we didn't need to. We just literally were going to, all we had to do was show up on the day in 1990 and we'd be government. But when that change comes, you literally can't stop it until it's washed across the top of you. It's had its impact, and then 2 elections later, probably not just 1 but 2, and certainly by 3 elections, it's gone. And I had a statement that I used in the Herald in '99, which I don't think was liked very much by my colleagues, but I made the comment, when you're in government, friends come and go, but enemies accumulate.
Very perceptive. You're absolutely right.
It is true. People love you because you did some tax change. Oh, thank you for that, love it. But a week later, it's gone. And you can cut this for them. Oh, fantastic, love that. But there's no real loyalty to it. But if you do something that they don't like, when we reneged on the superannuation and we were going to get rid of all the surtax and we actually increased it, I know people in my electorate old people who still hate me because I lied to them.
Yep. Okay. So you were in Parliament for 20 years, Maurice? Is that right? 30 years. Bloody hell.
87 till 2000. I know, you get less for murder.
I was just going to say, you'd be institutionalised, wouldn't you?
Part of the furniture.
All right.